There is a version of
didn't
this
come
story
tonight.
that ends with a whole town
Perhaps the
weeping
memories
at
were
a
too
woman's
strong,
serving window.
the sorrow too
I am
fresh
not
to
going to
witness
tell
this
you
place
that
again.
version. It isn't true, and the true one is better and harder and worth your time. Here is what is true. A woman named Maren Osby, 52 years old, walked out of a marriage with her name on nothing and $11 in her purse. She spent 9 of them at a county surplus auction on the one thing nobody else in the yard would touch. A rusted-out travel trailer with a caved-in roof, and under 40 years of grime, a small bird someone had once painted by hand on the side. The whole town laughed. Her own grown son told her to sell it for scrap, and the night she pried open the bench seat inside that ruined trailer, she found something the last owner had sealed in a coffee tin and meant to be found. A bundle of recipe cards, a ledger of small debts, most of them forgiven, a letter in an old woman's shaking hand, and folded behind the letter, a deed. A real recorded deed to a corner lot in the middle of a dying downtown, and the letter said, in so many words, "Feed people and you cannot lose." Now here is the part the Weeping Town version leaves out. The part that is the whole reason I am telling you this at all. A deed is not a treasure. A deed can be a bill, because that corner had not been sitting there for free all those years. The taxes on it had gone unpaid quietly for a long time after the old woman died. And unpaid taxes do not disappear. They wait, they grow, they turn into a lien, and a lien gets sold. And the person who buys it can, in the end, take the very land the deed describes, no matter whose name is on the paper in the coffee tin. Maren had not inherited a corner. She had inherited a debt with a deadline on it, and a beautiful letter that told her a thing the law would flatly refuse to honor. This is the story of what it actually costs to keep something the world already decided you had no right to. Told honestly, with the real numbers and the real deadline, and the day it very nearly all came apart. No crowd stopped the trucks. What stopped them, if anything did, was paperwork filed correctly before a clock ran out. The week before the auction, Maren counted her money 3 times on the edge of a motel bed, the way you do when you are hoping the number will change, and it never does. $11 and some coins, a checkout notice already slid under the door, and a coffee tin full of her mother's recipe cards, which was the one thing she had fought to keep out of the divorce, because a rusted tin of index cards was worth nothing to Ward, and so he had let her have it, the way you let a dog keep a bone that has no meat left on it. She had married Ward at 24, and signed whatever he put in front of her, because that was how it was done then, and because back then she still believed the man across the table was on her side. The house went in his name, the savings sat in his name. When the lawyer finally added it all up after 28 years, Maren's share came to a checking account that would not have covered a week of groceries. She had spent most of those years cooking, first at a diner, then in the elementary school kitchen, feeding 400 children a day, learning which ones came to school hungry and quietly keeping back a roll or two for the ones who did. Then the district closed the little school and bused the children 2 towns over, and the letter thanking her for 22 years of service came printed, not signed. So that was where she was. 52, unsigned for, checked out of by the week until the week ran out. The night before the notice took effect, the clerk at the motel desk mentioned the county surplus auction while her card declined for the 2nd time. He wasn't being unkind. He was filling the silence. "They sell off whatever nobody claims," he said. "Cars, campers, cheap if you've got cash. Fella bought a whole boat last spring for $11. Maren did not want a boat. She wanted 4 walls she could lock and a roof no one could take away on a Friday afternoon. $9 would not rent a room anywhere on earth. But $9, it turned out, could buy a roof if the roof was bad enough that nobody else wanted it. The county lot sat behind the old fairgrounds, a gravel yard fenced in chain link, crowded with flatbeds and men in canvas coats walking the rows with coffee, taking their time because they could afford to. Maren stood at the edge in her good coat, which was 2 winters old, and did not raise her hand once, because she could not afford to want anything until the very end. She had learned, in 22 years behind a serving line and 2 years of coming apart, how to move through a place and leave no mark on it. It turned out that being invisible behind a counter and being invisible out in the open were the same skill. The trailer sat in the last row, in among the lots nobody had bothered to clean up. A little can-of camper a family might have towed behind a station wagon a lifetime ago. One corner of the roof folded in like a soda can, tires flat and grey with rot. Somebody had sprayed an orange number on the side. When the auctioneer got to it, even he sounded tired. Lot 41, travel trailer, as is. County had it impounded 8 years, fees nobody paid, no title issues. Sold as scrap, folks. Who'll start me at 50? Nobody moved. A man near the front offered a match and a can of gas, and the crowd laughed and the auctioneer smiled the way you smile at a joke you've heard 100 times. He worked his way down. 50, 25, somebody end this. Marin had walked closer without deciding to, and put her hand on the cold metal, and that was when she saw it. Under the grime, faint as an old bruise, a small painted bird with one wing lifted, as if it had always meant to take off and never quite had. Below it, in hand lettering nearly gone, 2 words she could just make out. The sparrow. 9, she said. Her own voice surprised her by coming out steady. The auctioneer found her in the crowd, and for a second nobody said anything at all. Then he shrugged. $9 from the lady in the brown coat. A woman off to the side, a woman whose son Marin had put mashed potatoes in front of for 6 years, called out for her to keep her $9, that the thing was a tetanus shot on wheels, and the crowd laughed again. Marin kept her hand on the bird and did not turn around. The gavel came down, sold, to the lady who likes a project. Ma'am, you've got 48 hours to move it, or it's the county's again. She paid at a folding table by the gate, 9 ones and a handful of coins counted into a grey cash box, and a yellow receipt slid across without anyone looking up. She folded the receipt into her pocket next to nothing else, and walked back to a trailer she now owned, and had no way on earth to move. She did not yet know that the receipt in her pocket was the least complicated piece of paper she would own for a long time. That was where the man with the tow truck found her. He was somewhere in his 50s, built low and wide, with grease worked so far into his knuckles that soap had given up on them years ago. The patch on his coat carried the name of a salvage yard she had driven past 1,000 times and never once needed. He looked at the caved roof, the flat tires, the orange number, and then at her, at the good coat 2 winters old, at how she stood beside the thing like she was guarding it. You bought 41, he said. It wasn't a question. I did. Dov Karas. I do the county's hauling. Half these lots end up on my flatbed to the crusher anyhow. He rubbed his jaw. You got a place to put it? No. He nodded slowly, like that was the answer he'd expected and maybe even preferred. Figured. You know the old depot corner downtown? Corner lot's been empty since before you or I went grey. Nobody parks there, nobody cares. County's supposed to mow it and doesn't. He jerked his chin at the trailer. I'll drop you there. Won't cost you a thing. Why would you do that? Because I hauled a lot of good machines to the crusher this morning that weren't half as interesting as a camper, older than either of us, that nobody's supposed to want. He was already hooking chains under the frame with the ease of a man who'd done it 10,000 times. Junk's just something that's been waiting for the right pair of hands. You'll figure out which it is. He winched it up, and the whole trailer groaned and shed a fine snow of rust, and the little painted bird tilted up toward the grey sky. They rode downtown with the heater going and the radio low. Dov did not ask her story, which she was grateful for. He asked instead whether she cooked, because he had noticed the coffee tin of cards riding in her lap, like a passenger she meant to keep safe. When she said most of her life, school kitchen, something moved behind his weathered face. Some thought he sat down carefully and did not pick back up. She watched the town slide past the window, the 2 blocks of downtown still open, and the 4 that were not, and she tried to remember the last time anyone had asked her a question about herself, and then waited for the answer. The depot corner sat where the town's one main street gave out, a rectangle of cracked asphalt and knee-high weeds under a single dead streetlight, the old station boarded and sway-backed behind it. Dov backed the trailer into the corner nearest the depot, chocked the frame with 2 cinder blocks, and stepped back to look at his work. He said the roof would leak where it had stove in, and that he had a tarp in the yard she could have, and jugs of water, and did she have a lantern? She had a phone with an hour of battery. He grunted, went to his truck, and came back with a work light and a coil of extension cord, plugged it into an outlet on the depot's back wall, and to the surprise of them both, it hummed to life. "Well, look at that," Dov said. "Depot's still on the town's meter, nobody ever cut it." He hung the light inside the trailer's door. "Don't go telling the mayor." Then he tipped 2 fingers off his brow and left her there, in a wrecked trailer on a corner nobody wanted, with the sun going down behind the boarded depot. Inside it was worse than out. The stove-in corner had let in years of rain, and the far end was black with mildew. A dinette bench sat under the roadside window, cushion long gone, just a plywood box with a hinged lid. A narrow galley ran along the opposite wall, and above it, screwed flat to the paneling, was a rectangle of plywood where a window ought to have been. Someone had covered an opening and painted over it, and the paint had not quite hidden the shape of the frame beneath. Maren ran her sleeve down the wall and uncovered again the bird, blue with a white breast, and under it, in faded lettering, the same 2 words, "The Sparrow." She had lived in this town most of her life and had never once heard of it. But someone had painted this by hand, with care, a long time ago, and had loved it enough to give it a name. She set her mother's tin on the galley counter, because she did not know what else to do with her hands, and because a counter with something on it felt less like a wreck and more like a place. Then she sat on the plywood bench in the last of the light and let herself be tired. "It's got a roof," she said out loud to no one. "This morning I didn't." Her phone buzzed against her hip. Her son. She almost didn't answer, and then made herself. "Mom." Cole's voice already had the edge in it, the tired disappointment he'd learned from his father. "Dad said you bought a camper at the county auction. Please tell me that's not true." "It's true. You cannot live in a broken-down trailer downtown where the whole town can see you. Do you know how that looks? People are already talking. Somebody sent me a picture of it on a flatbed. I'm sure they did. Just sell it for scrap. Come stay in Dad's basement till you get yourself sorted," he offered. "He's trying to help." Maren looked at the little painted bird glowing in the work light. "Your father spent 28 years helping himself, Cole. I think I'll pass on his basement." The line went quiet, and when he spoke again, the edge was gone, and what was under it was worse, because it was embarrassment. "You're making this hard for everybody," he said, and hung up. She set the phone face down and did not cry, because she had done enough of that in the motel, and it had never once moved the number in her purse. It was full dark when she finally tried the bench. She'd sat on it for an hour before she noticed the lid was a lid, hinged, meant to lift, the seat of it a storage box the way those old dinettes always were. It didn't want to open, not locked, just rusted and swollen and stuck fast. She worked her fingers under the lip until her knuckles went white and it still would not give. And so she found the flathead screwdriver in Dov's worklight kit and worked the blade into the seam and threw her weight against it, and with a crack that rang through the metal shell, the lid tore free of whatever had held it and swung up on its ruined hinge. Inside the dark of the bench, wrapped in oilcloth gone stiff and brown, lay a bundle the size of a bread loaf. And the moment Maren's fingers closed on it, she understood that whoever had wrapped this had wrapped it to last, had meant it to be found by someone, someday, who was finally ready to look. She peeled the oilcloth back one stiff fold at a time. Inside was a coffee tin, the twin of the one on her own counter, its lid sealed with a ring of yellowed tape. When she worked the lid loose, the smell that came up was old paper and cold grease, and something faintly sweet, like a kitchen closed a long time. The tin was full. A thick bundle of index cards held with a rubber band that snapped to powder when she touched it. A stack of photographs with scalloped white edges. A marbled black composition book worn soft at the corners, and on top of it all, folded once, a single sheet of lined paper with 2 words written across the outside in a slanting hand. "Read me." She did not read it right away. She looked at the photographs first, because a face is easier than a letter. The top one showed this same trailer, but young. The bird bright, the wing lifted and hopeful. The window she now knew was under the plywood, standing open and folded down into a little counter. Behind the counter stood a woman, broad and plain and maybe 40, hair tied back. Sleeves shoved past the elbow, handing a plate across to a man in a work coat with a lunch pail on his arm. Behind him, a line of men stretched back out of the frame. On the counter, propped where everyone could read it, a hand-lettered board, hot plate, 25 cents. If you're short this week, eat anyway. On the back, in the same hand, the gate, the first bad winter. She went through the rest slowly. The woman got older across the stack, grayer, heavier, but she was always at that window, and there was always a line. The composition book was a ledger, hundreds of names down the left side, small sums beside them, $1, $2.50. Most of the numbers had a line drawn through them and a note beside it. Paid Friday, paid in canned corn. Gone to Ohio, forget it. Passed on, God rest him, forget it. Whole columns of small debts and whole columns of them forgiven. Last she unfolded the letter. The hand was harder here, shakier, an old woman's. If you found this, then the sparrow is yours now, and I expect you did not pay much for her. That is all right. I never charged much either. My name is Alma Pruitt. I ran this wagon at the cannery gates the winter they shut the line down, and 40 families in this town went hungry at the same time. I could not fix the cannery. I could fix a hot plate of something, so that is what I did every day, for as long as there was a day. Feed people first. The books can wait. A town that keeps its griddle warm can survive just about anything. There is more I have to tell you, but my hand is tired tonight, and the light is going. Come back tomorrow. I will still be here. The letter stopped there, mid-thought, as if the writer had meant to pick the pen back up in the morning. Marin sat with it a long while, then folded it along its worn crease, set it beside her mother's tin, and lay down on the bare bench with her coat for a blanket, and she slept better than she had in a year. On the strength of a dead woman's kindness and a beautiful sentence that was about to cause her a great deal of trouble. Dov came back a little after 7 with a rolled tarp and 2 jugs of water, and found Marin outside in the cold light with the photographs fanned across her knees. When his eye caught the top one, something in his face went still. Where'd you get that? It was in the bench, sealed in a tin. She held it up. You know her. He took the photo in 2 greased fingers and held it a long time. That's Alma. That's her wagon, the Sparrow. He shook his head slowly. I'll be damned. I thought the county scrapped this thing years ago. And then, standing in the cold with the picture in his hand, he told her, and she gave him the quiet nobody had ever thought to give her. The cannery had been the town, he said. Nearly everybody's mother or father had stood on that line once, filling cans and sending them out on the railroad behind the depot. Then 40 winters back the company closed the line without warning, 2 weeks before Christmas, and put the whole town out of work in an afternoon. The bank wouldn't lend. The church pantry ran dry by January, and Alma Pruitt, who cooked at the diner and didn't have 2 nickels herself, took her husband's old camper, cut a window in the side, and hauled it down to the padlocked gates, where the laid-off men still showed up every morning out of habit, standing around with nowhere to go. And she fed them. A hot plate, a quarter, and if you didn't have the quarter, she wrote your name in a book and told you to pay when the cannery came back. The cannery never came back, Dov said. She never collected most of it, fed this town out of that little wagon the better part of her life, right up till she got too sick to lift a pan. Then she died and there wasn't anybody to take it on, and after a while folks just quit talking about her. He handed the photo back. There's people still alive who'd be dead without that woman. I'm one of them. My dad brought me down to that window on a sled the winter I was a boy, because there wasn't a thing to eat in our house. He cleared his throat, hard. Anyway, you want a hand with that tarp or not? They spent the morning on the roof, and by the time they had the caved corner drawn back into something like shape, and the tarp lashed down against the wind, Marin's hands were bleeding, and she felt more like herself than she had in a long time. Because once the roof was holding, She could not stop. She dragged out the ruined cushion and burned it in a rusted barrel. She scraped mildew off the walls with a putty knife and the bleach Dove brought, and under decades of grime, a working galley began to appear. A dented flat-top griddle that folded down from under the counter, a propane bottle Dove filled from his truck, and when she struck a match to the burner, the old steel ticked and warmed, and she put both hands flat on it and nearly wept. It worked. Alma had built it right. She should have felt only that. Instead, at the bottom of the tin, under the recipe cards, she had found the thing that changed everything. A second folded sheet, stiffer, and folded inside it, a stiffer thing still. A document on heavy stock with a raised county seal she could feel with her thumb before she ever saw it. The letter's second page picked up in the same shaky hand, right where it had left off. Now, here is the part I did not have the strength to write last night. This corner where I always parked, the old depot corner, I did not just squat on it all those years. In 1979 I bought it, cash, a little at a time, out of quarters. The deed is folded in behind this page, and it is recorded down at the county, whatever anybody tells you. I never built on it because the wagon was all the building this town needed. I am leaving the corner and the sparrow together to whoever brings her back to life and keeps the griddle warm for anybody who is short this week. That is the only condition. Feed people, and it is yours. Stop feeding them, and it belongs to the next hungry soul who will. And behind the letter, a county deed, the legal description of one corner lot at the end of the old Main Street, and on the owner's line, typed, Alma Pruitt. And beneath it, in the shaky hand, one last line, the last thing the old woman ever wrote. They will try to take it. Do not let them. Feed people, and you cannot lose. Maren's hands had gone very still. She had come to this corner the night before owning nothing but a wrecked trailer, and now she was holding a deed to the ground it sat on and a dead woman's blessing to keep it. For most of a day she let herself believe the thing the letter told her, that she had walked into a miracle, that all she had to do was cook, that a town's forgotten saint had reached forward 40 years to hand her a home and a purpose in the same breath. It is a wonderful thing to believe. She believed it right up until she took the papers to a lawyer, which is where the true story starts to diverge hard from the one you would want. The lawyer was young, working out of the county legal aid office between a stack of eviction cases, a woman named Ines Marchetti, who did Maren the great and rare kindness of telling her the bad news first. She spread the deed and the letter across her desk and read them both twice before she said anything at all. All right, Ines said finally. I'm going to give you the true version of this, because you're about to spend a lot of hope, and I'd rather you spend it with your eyes open. She tapped the deed. The good news is real, so hear it first. This deed is genuine, and it's recorded. I pulled it while you were in the waiting room. In 1979, Alma Pruitt bought that corner, free and clear, and the county has it on the books. That part is solid ground. So it's mine, Maren said. No, Ines said gently. That's the first hard thing. A recorded deed proves Alma owned it. It does not prove you do. For the corner to pass to you, this letter would have to work as her will. And I have to be honest with you about that letter, because it is beautiful, and it is also, as a legal instrument, very shaky. She turned it so they could both see it. This is what's called a holographic will, handwritten, no witnesses, no notary. Some states honor them. Some flat out don't, and even where they're honored, the requirements are strict. And this letter fails several of them. It never names a beneficiary. It leaves the corner to whoever brings the wagon back and keeps feeding people. Which is not a person, it's a description of an act. Courts call that an uncertain beneficiary, and a gift to an uncertain beneficiary tends to be void. It sets a condition, feed people forever, or you lose it. And open-ended conditions like that are often struck down too, as uncertain or against public policy. And it stops mid-sentence, undated, unsigned in the second half. A court could very reasonably decide this isn't a will at all. Just an old woman's notes, written the night before she meant to do it properly, and never got the chance. Maren sat with that. Outside in the waiting room, a baby was crying, and a man was arguing quietly with a clerk about a shut-off notice. "You're telling me the letter's worthless." "I'm telling you the letter is the most valuable thing in that tin and the weakest thing in this folder, and both are true at once." Ines set down her pen, but none of that is the real problem. I saved the real problem for last, because it has a name, and the name is a tax lien. Here is the mechanism at the center of this whole story, the thing the Weeping Town version cannot afford to explain, because explaining it makes the miracle impossible. When you own land, you owe taxes on it, every year, whether you live on it or build on it, or leave it as weeds. Alma Pruitt owned that corner free and clear, and free and clear does not mean free. It means no mortgage. The taxes still came due every single year, and for as long as Alma was alive, she paid them, a little at a time, the way she did everything. Then Alma died. No family stepped up. No estate was ever opened, because there was nothing anyone knew to claim, and the tax bills kept coming, to a dead woman, at an address nobody checked, and nobody paid them. "That's what happens," Ines said. "It's the most ordinary tragedy there is. A person dies, the property just sits, and the taxes pile up in the dark. Small amounts at first, nobody's watching. And then one year the county does what counties do. It puts a lien on the parcel for the back taxes, and then, to get its money back, it sells that lien. Sells it to who? To whoever will buy it. Investors buy tax liens all the time. You pay the county the back taxes, and in exchange you get the lien and the right to collect it, with interest and penalties, from whoever eventually pays. And if nobody pays," Ines paused, "if nobody redeems it in time, the person holding that lien can foreclose, can go to court, or through whatever process the state allows, and take the land itself. The deed in your tin does not stop that. A lien like this sits ahead of the deed. It is first in line, and it does not care whose name is on the paper underneath it." Marin already knew, somehow, the shape of what was coming. Somebody's bought the lien on Alma's corner. Ines turned her screen around. A holding company, but the address behind it traces to a development group. Lanning. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Curtis Lanning grew up here, went off, made money, and now he's assembling parcels downtown for a plaza. Grocery, pharmacy, parking. Good things, honestly. Things this town could use. And your corner, the depot corner, is the anchor of it. He bought the tax lien on it 18 months ago, and the redemption period is nearly run, and when it runs, he files. And the corner is his. Cleanly, legally, not because he's a villain. Because the taxes weren't paid, and the law is the law, and he read the record before anyone else thought to look. "So he's not going to bulldoze it," Marin said slowly. "He's going to foreclose it, take a dead woman's corner for a few years of unpaid taxes. That's the plan I'd draw up if I were his lawyer," Ines said. "Foreclose quiet and quick, before anyone with a claim wakes up. The thing is, you woke up, and you have the original deed and this letter, which nobody expected to exist. That changes the math. Not the way you want it to, but it changes it. How do I keep it?" Ines folded her hands, and this was the moment Marin would remember, because it was the moment the fairy tale ended and the real thing began. There's only one way, and it isn't feeding people, however much the letter wants it to be. It's called redemption. As long as the redemption window is still open, a party with a legal interest in the property can redeem it, which means pay off the entire tax debt. All of it, the back taxes plus the interest, which on tax liens runs high, plus penalties plus the lien holder's costs. You pay that full number by the deadline, and the lien is satisfied, and the corner is clear. You miss the deadline, or the deed vests to Lanning first, and it's gone. And after that, getting it back is almost impossible. You can't just show up with your letter and pay the taxes and take it back once the sale is final. You'd have to sue to overturn the whole thing and prove the county made a procedural error, and courts almost never grant that. Redemption is the door, and the door is closing. Marin asked the thing anyone would ask. "And if I let the deadline pass and pay the county later, once I've scraped the money together, then you've waited too long, and there is no later." That's the trap almost everyone walks into. Ines said it flatly, because it was the most misunderstood point in the whole business, and she had watched it ruin people. Folks think unpaid property tax is like a late credit card bill that you can always catch up, pay what you owe plus a fee, and be square. It isn't. There's a window, and inside the window you can redeem, and once the window shuts and the lien holder gets his deed, the debt stops being a debt. It becomes a completed sale, and the thing that sale bought is the land itself. After that, walking in with a checkbook does nothing. The county won't even take your money, because it isn't owed the money anymore. It already got paid by Lanning the day he bought the lien. The only move left is to sue to unwind the sale and prove the county botched the procedure, and they almost never do because they run this every week and they're careful about it. The deadline isn't a formality, it's the entire game. How much? Marin asked. To redeem, Enos named a number. It was not millions. The corner was a modest lot in a half-dead downtown, and the debt was years of small taxes compounded. But it was thousands, several $1,000s, plus interest, still climbing by the day. To Marin Osby, who had walked into that office with $2 left after the auction, it might as well have been the deed to the moon. And there's a wrinkle, Ines said, that we have to be honest about. To redeem, you have to be a party with a legal interest. An owner, an heir, a lien holder. And your claim to be Alma's heir rests entirely on that letter, the shaky one. Lanning's attorney will argue you have no standing at all. That you're a stranger who bought a scrap trailer and found some papers. If the letter fails as a will, you may not even have the right to redeem. We might have to open Alma's estate the proper way, establish that you're the beneficiary, and do it all before the clock runs out, which is weeks, not months. She let that settle. It also costs money you don't have, and it means standing up in front of this county and this town's favorite son and telling him no, with paperwork correctly, on a deadline. Are you the kind of woman who can do that? Marin thought about a serving line, and a letter that thanked her without a signature, and a checking account that couldn't buy groceries. I've spent my whole life being the woman nobody had to argue with, she said. Let's find out. The antagonist in this story is not a man twirling a mustache. He is a lawyer named Garrick Toll, and he represents the lien holder, and the single most important thing to understand about him is that he is right. When Ines filed her first motion to open Alma's estate and establish Marin's standing, Tolle's response was not a threat. It was 3 pages of careful, correct law, and it conceded nothing and lied about nothing. The taxes were owed. The record proved it. The lien was validly purchased. The record proved that too. The letter was not a will. He laid out every reason it failed, and his reasons were the same ones Ines had given Marin across her desk. He did not need to cheat. The facts were on his side of the ledger, and he knew it, and he never once pretended otherwise. And this matters. He never changed his mind. Not when the town started paying attention. Not at the end. He was an instrument of a law that said unpaid taxes have consequences, and the law was not wrong, and neither was he. Marin's first mistake was believing the letter over the lawyer, and it nearly cost her everything. For the better part of 2 weeks she could not spare. She did what the letter told her, instead of what Ines told her. She cleaned up the Sparrow, got the griddle running, hung Alma's old hand-lettered board back in the window, and she started to cook. And people came. Slowly at first, then not slowly. A retired couple, 2 roofers on their break. A boy who came every afternoon at exactly the same time and stood at the edge of the light until she waved him over. Dov brought a folding table and 3 chairs and quietly paid for a propane refill. Word went around that the Sparrow was open again after 40 years, and for those 2 weeks the corner had a warmth on it that the town had forgotten it was missing. And Marin let herself believe that this was the answer, that Alma had been right, that if she just kept the griddle warm, the way the letter said, she could not lose, that the doing of the good thing would somehow on its own defeat the arithmetic in Garrick Toll's 3 careful pages. It is the most seductive belief there is, and this channel exists to tell you the truth about it. Doing the right thing is not a legal strategy. Feeding people did not pay $1 of the tax debt. Every plate she served was a plate served, and it was good, and it changed nothing about the clock. and the clock did not care. Ines finally drove down to the corner herself on a cold Tuesday and stood in the trailer door and said the thing plainly. "It's beautiful, Maren, and the redemption deadline is 19 days out, and we have not filed the estate petition, and we have not raised a single dollar of the number. And if you spend these next 19 days cooking instead of fighting, you are going to serve a very warm Last Supper on a corner that belongs to Curtis Lanning." She set a calendar on the counter with the date circled in red. "Alma's letter told you to feed people. It did not tell you how to keep the ground under your feet." She ran out of time to write that part. Don't you run out of time to do it? That was the second mistake avoided barely, the mistake of mistaking a good heart for a plan. Maren closed the window that afternoon, for the first time since she'd opened it, and it felt like betraying the letter, and it was the only thing that saved the corner. Wherever you are watching this from, and I would genuinely like to know, so tell me in the comments what your town's version of the depot corner is, the place everybody forgot. Understand that this is the hinge the pretty stories skip. The good deed and the survival of the thing that lets you do the good deed are two different fights, and you have to win the second one with paper, on time, or you don't get to keep fighting the first. What followed was not a montage. It was 3 weeks of the least cinematic work imaginable, and it is the real reason she kept the corner. Ines opened Alma's estate the proper way and filed to have Maren recognized. Not on the strength of the shaky letter alone, but by tracking down 2 people still alive who could testify to Alma's clear, repeated, spoken intention that whoever revived the sparrow should have the corner, which is a different and sturdier thing than a broken sentence on a page. Toll fought all of it, correctly, and won some of it. The court agreed with him that the letter's condition, feed people forever or forfeit, was void, unenforceable, too uncertain to stand. Maren lost that piece for good. She would never own the corner the way Alma dreamed it, wrapped in a promise. If she got it at all, she would own it plainly, like anyone owns anything, with the freedom to fail and sell and be human, and the letter's beautiful curse would not follow it. That loss was real, and she grieved it, and it was also, Ines told her, the best thing that could have happened, because a gift with a curse on it is a gift you can lose in your sleep. And the money was the wall, and there was no clever way through it, and I am not going to invent one. She did not find a bag of cash in the trailer. She held 2 yard sales of things that were mostly not hers to begin with, and made a little. Dov organized the salvage yard men quietly, and they put in what they could, because half of them had eaten at that window as boys. The retired couple wrote a check bigger than they should have, and asked her not to say how much. It added up to real money, and it was not nearly enough, and with 11 days left, she was still thousands and short, and she sat on the plywood bench at 2 in the morning and understood, clearly, that she was probably going to lose. 2 things closed the gap, and neither was a miracle. The first was Ward, because when Ines went digging into Maren's finances to prove she couldn't pay, building the case for a hardship extension, she found what a good lawyer finds when a marriage ends badly. Ward, 18 months before the divorce, had quietly moved a chunk of money into an investment he'd sworn under oath he didn't have, and the investment was, of all the things in the world, an early stake in Curtis Lanning's downtown plaza. He had hidden marital assets, lied about them on his financial disclosure, and parked them in the very project trying to take Alma's corner. That is not a plot twist. It is the most common thing in the world, the reason judges make you swear to the disclosures, and when a spouse is caught hiding assets, a court can reopen the settlement. Ines filed. Ward, faced with the choice between a fraud finding and a quiet correction, corrected it. Maren's real share of 28 years came to her at last. Not a fortune, not even close, but a number with 4 figures in it that landed in her account 8 days before the deadline. It was the first money that had ever been unarguably, legally hers. She looked at it a long time before she spent it. The second thing was the boy. His name was lien, the one who came every afternoon and stood at the edge of the light, and over those weeks Maren had learned, without prying, that he came because there wasn't much waiting for him at home. She fed him the way Alma would have. No questions, just a plate and a stool, and the ordinary dignity of being expected somewhere. She did not save him. That is not a thing one person does to another in a month, and the honest version does not pretend otherwise. What she did was smaller and truer. She gave him a warm corner and a reason to come back, and when the town found out she might lose it, it was lien who went home and told a grandmother, who told a neighbor, who ran the church pantry, who knew about a county program almost nobody used. Here is how it actually ended, and it did not end with a crowd blocking a tow truck. The program the grandmother knew about was the county land bank, a quiet office with the power to do the one thing a private lienholder cannot: absorb a delinquent parcel, extinguish the back tax debt, and convey the ground to a responsible steward at a price the ground can actually bear, when doing so serves the public good. Land banks exist for exactly this. The forgotten corner, the dead owner, the taxes no one will ever fully collect. The parcel more to a town alive than to an investor's spreadsheet. It is not charity, and it is not a loophole. It is a boring, real, unglamorous instrument of public law, and almost nobody knows it exists, which is why almost nobody uses it, which is why Lanning's people had not planned for it. Hines built the case in the last 9 days, on almost no sleep, and it was made of documents, not speeches. Alma's recorded 1979 deed establishing the corner's history, the estate filing establishing Marin as the recognized steward of Alma's intent minus the void condition. Alma's ledger, hundreds of forgiven debts, entered not as sentiment but as evidence of the parcel's documented, decades-long public use, which is the exact thing a land bank is empowered to weigh. And the redemption figure, paid in part from Ward's disgorged money, and in part from a land bank arrangement that spread the rest over years, Marin could actually survive. The county board did not vote in a packed room while a crowd chanted. It voted in a half-empty Tuesday session on the recommendation of a staff attorney after reading a file. The motion carried. The land bank took the parcel, cleared the lien, and conveyed the depot corner to Marin Ostby under an agreement that it remain in community use. An agreement she signed gladly, because it was the one condition of Alma's she had wanted to keep all along, now written in a form a court would actually honor. Curtis Lanning lost the corner. He did not lose it because a mob shamed him, and he was not, in the end, a villain. He built his plaza around the corner instead of on top of it, and it opened a year later, and it was good for the town, exactly as Inez had said it would be. Garrick Toll never conceded a thing because he had never been wrong about the law. He had simply been outrun, on the law's own terms, by a woman who learned the rules in time. He sent a single email when it was over. Well argued. The record supported you. That was all. From Tholey, Inez said, that was a standing ovation. And Ward. Ward did not come to the corner hat in hand, reformed. He signed what the court made him sign, and he went on being who he was, and Marin did not forgive him so much as stop spending herself on the question. Her son Cole came by once near the end, and stood in the trailer door looking at the little griddle and the line out front, and he did not say he was sorry, because he wasn't the kind who could. Yet, he said, this is really what you want, not a question. And Marin said yes, and he nodded and left, and that was not a reconciliation. It was a door left open a crack, which is sometimes all you get, and she decided to be glad of the crack. The honest accounting, because that is the only thing this channel is for. Marin did not get rich. The corner is a modest lot with a restored trailer on it in a town still half empty. She feeds people, and some of them pay, and many of them can't. And she writes their names in a book, and draws lines through most of them, the way Alma did, and it does not make money. It costs money, and she keeps it going on the 4-figure remainder of a stolen marriage and whatever the window brings in, and the stubbornness that is the only inheritance her own mother left her in that first coffee tin. The deed she found did not make her a fortune. It very nearly made her homeless, because it came with a debt that dwarfed it, and she kept the ground under it by the narrowest legal margin there is, with weeks to spare, and only because she stopped believing the beautiful sentence in time to fight for the ugly one. She paid Dov back in the end, the only way that meant anything, when his salvage yard finally failed the next winter. The crusher business dying the way everything in that town was dying. She cleared the far end of the corner, and the two of them set his tools up under a lean-to, and now he fixes small engines on the ground he once dropped a wrecked trailer onto for free, and neither of them calls it charity, because it isn't. It's a debt repaid at a window, the way Alma always said debts should be settled. Most weeks he eats for free and pretends to argue about it. If you drive to the end of that main street today, past the 4 dark blocks and the 2 that came back, you will find a corner that a spreadsheet said was worth more empty. There is a little trailer on it with a bird painted on the side, one wing lifted, and a window that folds down into a counter, and a hand-lettered board propped where everyone can read it. There is usually a line. There is an old ledger under the counter with new names going into it, and old lines drawn through most of them. There is no plaque, because Marin wouldn't allow one. But the regulars know whose wagon it is, and when a new person asks about the name, somebody tells them about Alma Pruitt, and the winter the cannery closed, and the woman who fed a town out of a hot plate and a coffee tin. The deed that came in that tin never did what the letter promised. It was a bill before it was a gift, and it nearly took the ground instead of giving it. And the beautiful line at the bottom, "Feed people and you cannot lose," turned out to be, in the plainest legal terms, false. You can lose. Marin almost did. What saved the corner was not a good heart. It was a good heart that finally learned to file the right paper before the right deadline, and to tell the difference between the sentence worth living by and the sentence worth going to court over. But the letter was right about the other thing, the thing that isn't in any statute. A town that keeps its griddle warm can survive just about anything. Marin keeps it warm, and the coffee tin sits on the shelf above the window, both of them now her mother's and Alma's, side by side, where she can see them while she works.